How do I do that? With the audio? Yeah.
Where's your Zoom?
Here. Maybe I should stop the
right.
the sharing.
Yeah. Zoom, and you click on that. Yeah, out, meeting out.
The room is
Yeah. So then they will.
awesome.
We're like we like the rush and
All right.
Okay, now I need to share again.
There are like 5 people online to support you too. Okay. There's Emily, Hollis, there's Sophia, Joshua, and Latifa. All right. You got an audience? Yeah. Hey, Emily. So people online can hear us, right? Yes, okay.
Right.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. You can do whatever you want. Introduce yourself.
So, good morning, everyone. My name is Alexander Hölzmann. I am a PhD student at the University of Siegen at the Ubiquitous Computing Lab under guidance of Professor Christoph van Lahoven. I am a computer scientist. I did a bachelor in computer science. I did a master's in computer science, and now I'm doing a PhD in computer science.
We applaud you.
Today I'm going to talk about activity recognition with wearable sensors. And therefore the topic of my talk is, or the title of my talk is Beyond Counting Steps from Recording to Classification of Human Activities with Sensor-Based Wearable Data. So many of you probably are also already wearing an activity tracker, but I'm not sure if you're using it for more than just counting steps or doing some health monitoring. I do not. But there are many more applications that you can do with activity recognition and with wearable sensor data, and I'm going to show you a few of them today. I'm going to start with my motivation for doing a PhD. So this is basically me, I would say 5 to 6 years ago when I was doing my master thesis in a steel melting company in Germany. They gave me a huge pile of data that they recorded over probably many, many years, not having in mind that someone someday should do some machine learning with it. So I started to program my algorithm on this data, and I first received bad results, and then I did exactly this. I started to steal up the pile of data until the results were looking good. Now looking back, I know that I did many mistakes. I stumbled in many pitfalls. However, anyway, my interest for machine learning was there, and my interest for working with sensor data. And therefore, I decided to pursue a PhD in wearable computing together with Professor van Lahoven. So today, I'm going to start with an introduction on what activity or human activity recognition basically is. And then we are going to talk about a couple of selected papers that I worked on during the last 5 years. I'm now at the end of my PhD. I submitted my thesis. I'm just waiting for my oral exam.
yay.
So what is activity recognition? As the name suggests, we are trying to recognize activities, and these activities, they can come from multiple domains, like for example, sports. You can see here one person doing Nordic walking, another person doing jogging. But there are also many other sports that you can actually recognize with sensor data. Another important domain is activities of daily living. This includes, for example, vacuum cleaning or ironing, but also things like standing, walking, laying in bed, for example, doing the laundry, etc. So what people do during their daily life. Another important domain is in that industry data. Here you can see a streamline worker at the car manufacturer Skoda. I'm not sure if this brand is popular in the US. In Europe it is. It's from the Czech Republic. So this worker here is equipped with wearable sensors on his arm, and I think also on his chest. What devices do we use for sensing? I personally worked a lot with smartwatches, especially this device here. It became very important for me. I will tell you later why. This is an earbud. It's from Nokia Bell. I also worked with that. It's a prototype that has been released a couple of years ago.
Mm.
And I think it was the first earbud that had sensors integrated. I know that people, I did not, but I know that people also also work with devices like the Aura Ring, but there are actually no limits. So I know that there was, for example, a shoe released a couple of months ago by Adidas with a wearable sensor. There are armbands, there are headbands, so there are actually no limits as long as you can equip it with a sensor. What are IMUs, initial measurement units? Can you see the video? Okay. So IMUs are, or it's a collective term for three types of sensors. We have accelerometers, we have gyroscopes, and we have magnetometer. You can see here now an accelerometer signal. This video has actually been released by a company called Leomo, which is from Boulder. I think they have an office here. And they are producing these sensors. You can see here that the person is shaking the sensor along all three axes of the sensor. So we have X, Y, Z axis. And you can see whenever the person is shaking along one specific axis, that we have more activity on that axis. And this is basically the data, or this is how the data looks like that I'm working with. Some important terms that you need to know in order to follow this talk a little bit better. IMUs, I just introduced it. Accelerometers, it measures the value of change of velocity. We have gyroscopes, measures the rate of turn. Magnetometer, measures the magnetic field of the Earth around body. You're also going to hear the term hertz, which is the unit that we are measuring the sampling rate of a sensor with. So for example, when I'm later telling you that I recorded the data set with 100 hertz, then this means that we have 100 data points per second. So 100 data points will describe 1 second in real time. We have the ground truth, which are the annotations that the original author of paper or of a data set gave to, basically defined, and it's a reference point for us to evaluate our learning algorithms. Also, you're going to hear the term F1 score, which is a metric that we are using to evaluate machine learning classifiers. All right, so now I'm going to start to talk about the first paper. It's a recording system that we developed at our chair, and this system has been part of a big project where we monitored about 100 participants over half a year. These people were diabetes type 2 patients, elderly people, and they were asked to wear our system during the whole day. So this is the smartwatch that I just showed you. We also included, or this system includes also an app as well as a server backend and a web application. With the app and with the web application, you can control the smartwatch. You can start and stop measures. We had 2 research questions in mind with this publication. First one is, how can data sharing and accessibility be maximized? And second, how can we design a system that records reliable under real-world conditions? Why under real-world conditions? Because, as I said, these people were wearing this device in their daily life, so it needed to work under these conditions. Plus, since these people were often not very technical field, we needed to design a system which is easy to understand and easy to use. So we came up with this architecture here. The smartwatch records the data. Then it sends the data via Bluetooth Low Energy to an app, which then sends the data to the server, to a centralized server where we did some machine learning stuff. For this talk, right now, only the left side is important because this is the part of the system that I continued using in mostly every study that I did during my PhD. This device comes with a PPG heart rate monitor, a 3D accelerometer, and a 3D magnetometer. As you can see, the gyroscope is missing, so this is not a full IMU. If we would have all these 3 sensors, we would call it a full IMU. The interface includes some quality of life features, let's call it. battery status, you can see the date of you can see the date, you can see the time of the day. Plus, we have a step counter, and as well a feature called active minutes. Two anecdotes regarding the step counter and the active minutes. We tried out several different activity trackers, wearing them in parallel to try or to figure out if these activity trackers will count the same amount of steps. And surprise, they do not. It is just an approximation, and however, it's a magic number, and people they trust on it. However, if you are working with the step counter, you should take it with a grain of salt because it's not very precise. The active minutes is a concept that comes from sports science, and we implemented this feature using the heart rate sensor as well as the accelerometer sensor. And we implemented a threshold, and whenever the values raise above the accelerometer sensor threshold or the heart rate sensor threshold, this time has been counted as being active. However, since our participants were mostly elderly people, and elderly people in Germany, they drive a lot the bicycle, especially an e-bike. But if you are driving a bicycle, your hand is in a static position, so there is not a lot of acceleration. Plus, since the electronic motor is helping you, there is not such a raise in the heart rate. So these people were complaining in the end that their activity is not recorded as being active. Yeah, we didn't have a solution for this, but yeah, it's a common problem. Riding the bicycle is especially something which is still quite difficult for trackers to detect, even for commercial trackers. This device is so far something special because it has been the first smartwatch that has been released, which is completely programmable from scratch. You can program it in JavaScript, which is something that other products do not have. So when you're working with, for example, an Apple Watch, you will probably get aggregated data. You will often not get the raw data. And this is some kind of black box. And we as researchers, we don't want black boxes. We want to have transparency, which is why it was important for us to have such a device. All right, so since we applied this device in real-world conditions, I'm now going to talk about labeling data under real-world conditions, because we noticed that it was almost impossible to figure out what these people were doing in their daily life, because we didn't have a ground truth. We were not able to follow them with the camera. They did not provide us annotations for the data, so we ended up without annotations, without label data in the end. So we came up with the idea to do a study on this. And we asked our participants, we recruited 11 participants, asked them to wear our sensor for 2 weeks, and we asked them to use 4 different types of annotation methods. 2 annotation methods were in situ annotations, so the annotation happens whenever the activity happens in the domain. And 2 annotation methods are being executed at the end of the day. The first one is pressing a button on the smartwatch, and this button pressing creates a marker in the data that we can later use for annotation. For the in situ app, we asked them to install an app called Strava, which is a commercial app. People that are tracking their activities might know this app. So it's basically a timer that runs until you stop the timer again. Pure self-recall, the people were asked to write a diary at the end of the day, so sit down at the desk and write down what they did and when they did it. And in the second week of our study, we included another recall method. We called it time series recall. We gave them a graphical user interface with which they were able to visualize their sensor data as kind of as an aid to help them to remember what they did and when they did it. We wanted to answer 3 research questions with this publication. First, what is the influence of annotation methods on annotations quality and quantity? Second, which annotation method best suits specific research use cases? And third, does the annotation method has a measurable effect on the deep learning model? Here you can see on the bottom sensor data of one participant. The synonym is 90A4. It's one of our participants in the study. You can see the gray bar, which is the first annotation method button, yeah, the in situ button method. And you can basically see that there is no annotation. So in this day, this person totally forgot to annotate their data using the button, which is something that also happened to me while I was trying out the study as well. So it's something that you really easy where it was possible to forget. Using the diary, that person only annotated one activity during the day. So at the end of the day, that person was only able to remember one thing. Using the app, so kind of better, not really good. Using the app, we have more annotations, but you can see, for example, the first one here is about flat line, and flat line basically means that the sensor was running, but it was probably laying somewhere on the table or on the bedstand. It was not yet, the person was not yet wearing it. You can also see that the annotation that has been annotated by the diary moved slightly to the left. So there is some discrepancy there. Also, we have additional 3 annotations that were not annotated by the other 2. Using the graphical interface, we can now see that after the person were looking at their data, that the pink annotation moved to the right side because the person were able to see, to interpret the data and basically say, okay, this is actually the part where I have been active. We can also see that the annotation again moved to the right, the second one, which basically is the same annotation period as the one using the diary. This is something that we were able to see in almost every participant except a few. So for example, this one at the bottom, FC25.
Very
There were
good.
some very coherent annotations, there were some exceptions, but mostly everybody annotated the data differently depending on the method.
Alex?
Yeah.
Is that what they saw in the graphical interface, that visualization of activity?
Basically this. They only saw their signal, their sensor data. So we use these annotations then to train a deep learning classifier. And we can see that the in situ methods, blue and yellow, they had better results than the pure self-recall. Yeah. So this means basically that for the deep learning classifier, it was more important to have less annotations, because this is something I didn't tell you yet. We had less annotations using the app and in general using in situ methods, because this is a lot of work for the participants to remember to annotate their data in the moment. So people forgot it. So we ended up with less annotations in the end. So it's more important for the classifier to have more precise annotations than to have a huge amount of annotations or to have a huge amount of labeled data. However, introducing the self-recall graphical interface, we noticed that we had more annotations than using in situ methods, and they were also more precise as the ones that were produced by the diary method. Some lessons learned. Using self-recall method, we had very good acceptance because it was a low workload for participants. You can sit at your desk at the end of the day for 2 minutes and write down what you did. However, you are barely able to remember at what exact time you did it. And even some deviations in seconds might end up in wrong labeled data. You can achieve reasonably accurate results for course activity labels. So if you have a study where you only need course labels, then this might be a good approach. It can be improved by visualizing raw data. In situ methods generally produce more precise labels than self-recall. However, they are more labor intensive for participants. Also, for example, if you think about the app, you need to first remember that you should annotate, then you take out your phone, you unlock your phone, you open the app, you start the annotation, and you need to do the same thing again whenever you are ending the activity. So we think that this is more suitable for smaller studies where participants are willing to invest their time. Also, it requires careful implementation to avoid burdening participants. Also, we had a couple of participants, they refused to install the app. Not sure if this is a European thing, but there were people that had privacy concerns, so they didn't want to use that. If you would like to use such an annotation method in your studies, you should probably program an app in your lab on your own, and trying to design a UI that lowers the burden for the participants. All right. So this annotation topic now brings me to my favorite part of this talk, which is basketball activity recognition. I'm a basketball player since a young age. So Christoph, my professor, and I, we thought about how to combine my hobby and activity recognition. So we came up with the idea to do activity recognition in the basketball domain, where you have specific use cases for machine learning algorithms that you can explore. I will later tell you what this is exactly. So while I was annotating this basketball data, I realized that it was quite a lot of work. It's a tedious work to annotate data, especially if you have a lot of participants. So, well, maybe I stop the video first. Sorry. Okay, so it's a lot of work. It's a tedious work, and yeah, therefore it is important to have methods and to have help here in that field, and that there is more research focus on the annotation topic in general. This is a feasibility study that we did right at the beginning of my PhD in 2018 already. We tried to distinguish basketball classes from each other. We therefore used 4 classes, 3 types of dribbling. We called it low dribbling, high dribbling, doing crossovers, and in the end also doing the jump shot. You can see me dribbling basketball there. You see at the top the accelerometer data, then comes the gyroscope, then comes the magnetometer. I'm wearing the sensor on my dominant hand, the right hand right now. And whenever there is a change in my dribbling, you can see a change in the signal. And these are basically the patterns that we are trying to recognize here in activity recognition. We trained here a classical machine learning algorithm. I think it was a random forest as well as a KNN. You can see that we had some good results in this feasibility study, which is the reason why we came up with the idea to do a comprehensive basketball data set. We then did this after the pandemic, when we were able to record data again. I did this in cooperation with CU Boulder, with Christine Liu from computer science, and with one of her PhD students, Julia Romero. You know her? Oh, cool. So we recorded 24 participants in Boulder and in Siegen, which were executing 9+1 activities, +1, because we always have a null class, which is basically everything that is not one of the activities. So for example, if someone is taking a zip from the water bottle or tying their shoes, it's null. And 9 basketball specific classes. We included 3 sessions, a warm-up, a drill, and a game session. This is important because the warm-up and the drill session, they are kind of control environments. I told them what they should do. During the warm-up, they had the possibility to, or we were warming up together, and we were executing things like doing a layup, doing jump shots. But I told them that they can do it in the manner they would like to do it. Yeah, during the drill, I told them how they should do the jump shots, how they should do the layups. However, in the game situation, you need to improvise. You are contested, you need to fake a shot, you need to fake a pass, for example. You need to dribble around the player. So the data that is produced in a game session is always different, or in an uncontrolled environment is always different than the one that is controlled that is recorded in a controlled environment. We also included activities with a variety of characteristics, which are periodic, spontaneous, and complex activities. I will later tell you what this means exactly. we wanted to answer two research questions with this publication. First, to what extent can basketball activities be detected using wrist-worn sensors? And second, what challenges arise due to the less homogeneous nature of in-game actions? This is the recording setup. Again, we use the Bengal JS1, the smartwatch that I just showed you. We gave this smartwatch to every of our participants. We recorded them for 2 hours with 2 cameras placed in the middle of the court, one to the left and one pointing to the right. So we have a 180 degrees angle of the court. And this video footage we use later for annotating the data. We included sitting, which, for example, sitting on the bench during the game, standing, walking, running in different paces, dribbling, shooting the ball, doing the layup, passing the ball, and doing rebounds. You can see here now that sitting, standing, walking, running, and dribbling, they are periodic activities because we have a periodically returning pattern in the signal. Shooting and layup are complex classes because we have these classes consist of subclasses. So, for example, shooting includes jumping and then throwing. Doing a layup includes doing 2 steps, doing a jump, throwing the ball in the basket. Doing a pass and rebounding are very short classes. This data set has been recorded with 50 Hertz. So remember now 50 samples is 1 second. And if we look on the timeline at the bottom, we can see that passing and also rebounding, they are around about 30 samples long, which means that this activity is less than a second long from start to end. So it's very short, and this makes it very difficult for a machine learning classifier to be recognized. We trained 2 different deep learning architectures on our data in 2 different training and testing situations. So on the left side, you see here now training on drills and warm-up, but we did not include the game yet. So this is now a controlled environment. You can see that dribbling, shooting, doing a layup, walking, running, standing, and sitting are overall recognized quite well. Passing and rebounding more or less. Rebounding is less than 10%, which is in a 9 or 10 class problem more about it's guessing more or less.
Question.
Yeah.
That the higher the number means like the class or the algorithm is recognizing it best.
Yeah. Higher means better. So this is the F1 score. Sorry, I didn't mention that. This is the F1 score now. This is the metric with which we are evaluating machine learning classifiers. And it basically means how much percent of the instances of the class that we had has been recognized correctly.
Okay.
So for example, 80% of all dribbling instances that we had been recognized correctly.
Okay.
Yeah. So, however, as soon as we transfer this to the uncontrolled environment of game, you can see that there's a sharp drop in the results in the F1 score. So all basketball specific classes are now classified not very bad, but bad. 20% is not that bad. It's not guessing yet.
Get.
Periodic activities like running, walking, and sitting were recognized still quite well. Standing is something which we later realized that is not really happening in a game. Of course you stand, but you do not stand in a static position. So when you would like to get noticed, so you're moving, you are trying to get the ball, so there is no static standings. So some lessons learned here. Transferring the classifier in an uncontrolled environment is something that's that is really difficult, and this is also something that is still an actual problem, I think, in the activity recognition community, because whenever you have a data set that is, for example, lab data, and you try to transfer it to real world application, it doesn't really work.
Mm.
And this is something that we can show with this experiment.
Mm.
All right, this brings me to the last topic of my talk, which is deep learning for activity recognition. So heads up, this is now going to be a little bit more technical. I'll try to make it as easy as possible to follow. We tested transfer learning for human activity recognition for sensor data. If this is something that is doable, transfer learning is a technique that comes from computer vision. You probably know this example where you train on elephants and you try to recognize rhinos, for example, because they share some characteristics like the gray skin, or both have 4 legs, etc. So you will be able to, up to a certain degree, to recognize rhinos if you have a classifier that is trained on elephants. We try to do the same with sensor data, and we therefore use a technique called weight transfer. We use 2 different data sets. One is PAMA2 and the other one is Skoda mini checkpoint. The names are not so important right now. Important is that one is activities of daily living. So remember things like ironing, doing laundry, etc. The other one is the industry related data set that I showed you in the beginning. We used an architecture called DeepComp LSTM, which is probably right now still the most popular architecture in activity recognition.
Mm.
This is the architecture on the left side. We have some convolutional layers, some LSTM layers at the end, classification. Our results show that transfer learning must be considered carefully because it doesn't really work always in every case. In transfer learning, you always cut away the last layer and retrain it after transferring. It's a classification layer. However, you can either keep the layers in between that are the feature extractors. So you can keep the convolutional blocks, you can keep the LSTM layers, or you can also retrain them. You can fine tune them. We wanted to answer 2 research questions with this paper. First one is, can model transfer between diverse data sets or sensor positions effectively enhance classification outcomes? And second, how does aligning sensor orientation, for instance, through axis inversion, influence classification accuracy? Why axis inversion might be important, I'm going to tell you in a couple of seconds. These 2 data sets that we use, they share differences, they share similarities, but they also have a lot of differences. So as I already said, we have different classes in both data sets. We also realized after talking to the authors of both data sets that these data sets were recorded with different orientations. So in PAMA, for example, the z-axis was pointing on the wrist inwards. However, on the Skoda data set, the z-axis pointing outwards. Also, x and y are swapped.
Oh, yeah.
They have, and this is the reason why we selected these data sets, they have a lot of similarities, like for example, the sampling rate. Both data sets are recorded with 100 Hertz, so 100 samples represent 1 second. Both have an accelerometer, and both data sets were recorded with the same, or on the same position on the body. We tested 4 different transfer methods. The first one is training on the left wrist data and transferring them to the right wrist. We figured out that if we stay in the same data set, it's not across data sets. So we stay in PAMA, for example, now, and we train on this and test on this. It means that the axis that pointed outwards pointed to the left. After moving this, it pointed to the right side. So we were able to see that as soon as we inverted the axis, that the results were better than if we don't invert the axis. So it makes sense to map the sensor orientations if you can do this. We also tried this out using the chest data as the target. However, here's a little bit more difficult to really map the sensor to the right orientation. Therefore, we tested this out with every possible permutation of the orientation, and we were able to see that there are a couple of orientations that work better than other ones. We also trained on one data set and transferred it to the other data set, which is something that did not give you any classification benefits. So you didn't have a classifier that classified better, but it can give you benefits regarding the computational time. if you are retraining your classifier. So you will need less computational time, and therefore maybe also a less strong computer for retraining, etc. We also tried out if we can transfer between sensors. So training, for example, on the accelerometer, transferring it to the gyroscope, or transferring it to the magnetometer. This is something that didn't work. These three sensors are too different, and you cannot transfer between them. A couple of lessons learned. So transferring between data sets or sensor types does have very limited benefits. Transfer learning only works with human activity data if we fine-tune layers. Pre-trained weights are often better than standard initialization methods with regards to the training time of a neural network. So when you are programming network, you are working with PyTorch or Keras probably, and they give you these initialization methods. If you have pre-trained weights from something else, it's probably better to use them than the initialization methods that you have in these libraries. Artificially mapping sensor axes can increase the model's prediction capabilities in a transfer between recording positions. Some future research that we think is still needed regarding transfer learning. So the conditions when you can successfully use transfer learning are not quite clear. When can you use the data set? When you cannot use the data set? So this is something that needs to be explored. Also, it might be important to know if it's possible that we apply pre-processing steps on the data, that this makes it more easier to transfer a model between data sets. I'm going to end this talk with my conclusion. So during the last 5 to 6 years, I think I learned a lot. I learned how to design machine learning models. I learned how to implement them, how to evaluate them. I learned how to present my results and how to defend my results. But I think more important is that I also learned that deep learning architectures or deep learning models are often only a tool. More important are things like pre-processing the data and having the correct annotations for the data, because if you don't have that, then your classifier will not work in the end. And even though, or I think that there's a lot of research focused on the deep learning architectures themselves, but I think we could maybe shift this a little bit more towards the things like, parts of the machine learning pipeline, like annotation, like pre-processing, maybe also post-processing, because this is more important than many people probably think. At the end, I would like to show you something that I'm currently working on with a colleague. This is a data set. It's called Where. It has been released. We are combining here egocentric video data as well as IMU data. So these participants, they are wearing one of our sensors in every limb. So we have 4 sensors and video data. We would now like to push this a little bit further to develop Where 2.0. This is why we are looking for collaborators, for participants. If you would like to work with us on this data set, we can maybe talk about it after the.
How long does it take, the study?
The recording, one
Yes.
recording session?
For participants?
I would say half an hour.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah,
That's
that's
not-
that up.
cool, and then you are.
It includes a couple of fitness activities.
It's like 2 in 1, you get some.
Even just walking, I can do that.
So I was wondering in basketball or any of these kind of things, did you have any, you've got a whole bunch of relative position data, these went these directions, X, Y, Z, but you have any absolute for like a mesh, a survey mesh that says, oh, well, I'm shooting from here, so I'm using more energy to shoot a longer shot, or I'm definitely not doing a layup here because I'm not anywhere near the basket.
No, we don't
No
have that.
absolute positioning.
No absolute position. This is the data set only includes IMU data, only sensor data. There are data sets with visual data that comes mostly from the computer vision community. You have there, for example, recordings from a basketball court where people are playing, or recordings from NBA games that they are using to do action recognition. They call it action recognition, what we call activity recognition. It's basically the same. They are using video data, we are using sensor data.
Uh-huh.
However, we didn't combine this, but it is actually something that also the reviewers of my paper asked for, if they can have the video data. Unfortunately, we didn't include it in the data.
And for like the tracking of the people and their
Mhm.
message, is there any things like an RFID or something that you would pass by that would automatically just like, oh, they went out the door, they went to the kitchen,
No.
or they went down the
No, actually, I could, while I was annotating the data, I could see in the data when people were walking outside, for example.
How do you tell?
Because of the intensity of the signal.
Yeah.
That's funny. You go like an expert in the,
Yeah.
just recognizing what the thing detecting the
Yeah.
signal.
Yeah. You have more questions?
Anybody online want to ask questions? No, okay.
Pretty.
I'm user who, moving on, do you see yourself also using some other metrics or information that some commercial trackers already have included, like things like heart rate, for example,
Mhm.
because you saw gaps between when people thought they were working out versus when they weren't. But do you see ways to incorporate other sensors? Or like, are you
Well,
interested in that at all?
I did not do that. However, I know that that commercial products, like for example, they also use your GPS coordinates. Because, for example, the bicycling thing, which is still not easy to recognize, the signal will look basically the same as if you would ride the tram in the city, for example. Yeah. So this is one thing where they also use GPS coordinates
Yeah.
to distinguish these two things then from each other. There are also a lot of people that are working with PPG heart rate sensors and combining them with IMU signals. There is research about it.
What are the type of sensors that are combined in like the sports domain?
So, what do you mean?
Like, for example, you mentioned like this company, Liomo from Boulder. What are they using it for? Like the IMU that they, like the sensors that they
As
are
far as I
using?
know, they're having a running computer. They are producing running computers for professional athletes. And sensors that they can put on their feet, for example. And this computer then is tracking their running behavior and trying to give them coaching. Trying to coach these people.
So I'm gonna share 3 stories with you.
Okay.
So one is that I think a couple of months ago, university have for the staff, they encourage people to install Move for CU Health Point. So if you have over 10,000 staff or something, and then 12 days, they will give you $25
Oh.
on the phone. So I was like, okay. So I start working more. Okay, so that was interesting because then I find out I was chatting with another faculty. I said, that's my Comcast paying thing. I need to go out and work. So that was interesting because then I will remember, I want to get the $25. I remember hit recording. And so it tracks GPS and other things, so it knows.
Yeah.
So that's the first story. The second story was when I was in Singapore, I actually got 4 or 5 sensors weighing on myself for a whole month. They didn't agree, but they are ballpark, right? So I have the Fitbit, I have the Jawbone, I have, I'm trying to see how consistent they are.
Yeah.
They're not the same, but
Yeah.
then it's within, I guess, the errors. Yes. And what's the third I want to share? Oh, so Singapore, one time they want to encourage the whole country, everybody go exercise. And so they give a particular sensor for pedometer that you put. And then they find out some people put it on the fan. And not moving, the sensor is moving because they want to get the money or whatever.
You can also do this with this.
I guess I can
move it.
keep moving,
Yeah.
so I don't have to move.
You can take the steps.
That's funny.
Yeah, that was funny.
So what would you like to, like, what would you think is gonna be next for you?
Well, you know what comes next. Well, yeah. So our plan is that I'm going to move to Boulder beginning next year, probably. So I'm now starting to look for jobs for January 25. Somewhere in the IMU industry, let's say.
Oh, you already found a company. Did you talk to them yet?
No, not yet, but I should.
Okay.
Yeah.
Industry?
Or I am tending towards industry, I think, but academic would be also an option. Awesome. Thank you. Okay,
Very cool.
more questions?
Rishi,
Should we do one more question right now?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, yeah.
We okay? So,
imagine this is a defense.
Before you kill them.
okay. Two questions. then. So
Mhm.
what do you think is the technical challenge here that you're most interested in solving? Because you presented a number of approaches
Mhm.
where you could improve activity recognition by either getting the people themselves to annotate their activities more accurately.
Mhm.
You could do it by bringing in multimodality, like the stuff that you're doing now with
Mhm.
vision plus visual sensing. Or you could just go hard on deep learning and machine learning methods to improve models themselves. Which of these three do you think, or what combination of these three do you think would offer the best results, and which combination are you most interested in or most excited about?
I think I'm most interested in right now in the invitation problem. It is also the most recent paper I'm working on. And this is something that is more or less overlooked by the research community. I know that there are a couple of people worldwide working on this topic, but not so many. Yeah, this is probably my personal interest, or where I would like to work most on. Deep learning, regarding deep learning architectures, I know many people are working on this, and there are, I don't know, every now and then there comes a new deep learning architecture that is going to be, that is released. Only a few of them get really popular.
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't see so much potential there.
Okay.
Combination you asked for. Right now, we can see a trend with this multimodality. There are new data sets that are coming out using video data, combining that with IMU data or other data, like for example, if you have indoor recordings, you can also combine it with Wi-Fi signals, etc.
Oh.
You can see this.
Yeah.
There are a couple of data sets.
That also points to like a fundamentally different approach where systems like Wi-Fi are outside in
Mhm.
large scale tracking of multiple people at the same time versus this is again egocentric data sets, and all of your work so far has been focused on egocentric data. Like,
Sorry?
like the products you presented so far
Mhm.
have all focused on wearable sensors,
Yeah,
and
on
individual people where
Yeah, yeah.
do you think is there a reason why you chose to work with that? Is that how things work in the field versus say in the context of a large basketball match, for example,
Mhm.
or sports more generally, there's a lot more external depth sensing
Yeah.
technology that's coming into the play.
I think this is also something that is already happening. So
Yeah.
professional clubs, they are tracking the players on the field. Probably.
I mean, they have GPS trackers on their chest, but
Oh,
they
they
also have
okay.
these external motion
Yeah.
trackers for general activity.
Yeah, they are doing this. And there are also coaches, like I read that in soccer, they are using such coaches a lot with IMU sensors already in shoes. So there are products that are doing this.
But based on your sense of the field, do you
Mhm.
see more people focusing on the outside in tracking / recognition software pipeline or the inside out like?
Or the outside in thing, like video data, etc.
Mhm.
This is easier. Another project that I'm currently working on with someone from Georgia Tech.
Mhm.
We are trying to do exactly this, to have a coach, a basketball coach, using IMU data only, but we are not there yet, let's say.
Last question on the annotation problem.
Mhm.
You pointed out that that's the biggest challenge or an underlooked challenge in
Mhm.
terms of the research field. in the first project where you were working with, I guess, elderly people with diabetes, and then also basketball, you have these two populations where they could benefit a lot from having better data about their own activity, but it seems like they don't see the benefit enough to want to annotate.
Mhm.
Do you think that there's room for, I guess, because so in the first project, or not in the first project, in the one about a matter of annotation, the title there, you presented alternate ways to enable people to annotate, either by looking at the visualization of their activity after the fact, or sending them, giving them an application to use in the moment. But then I know of projects that have looked at not physical activity recognition, but stuff like mood recognition, or trying to track people's mood over time, where a lot of work has gone into how do you elicit the right kind of behavior from people to want to annotate more, which is more of a human problem than a data, like, or a machine learning problem. This is
I'm not sure if I
talking-
get, if I get the question.
So when you're trying to tackle the annotation problem,
Yeah.
how much of that is also a more human behavior design problem? And do you think you see yourself trying to solve that, or is that not part of the scope of your work?
I don't think, well, if you would like to resolve this human behavior, you probably need to do a lot of UI design work, I think. Which is not something I do, or I did a lot. And I'm actually not seeing myself doing
Going to that.
UI design. But this is actually, it's a big problem, or it can be a big problem, because of course you can introduce biases with data set
Yeah,
by this.
by not doing that.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you. This is a great job.
Thank you very much.